Hello and welcome to CineMaine, where we look at films that are connected to Maine, whether they be set in Maine, filmed in Maine, or have any other loose connections to the state of Maine. And today we are looking at the 1986 action horror comedy? Maximum Overdrive, the only movie to be directed by Stephen King, based off of a script that he himself adapted from his own short story, Trucks, which was published as part of his first collection of short stories 8 years earlier. The basic premise of this film, as best as I can describe it anyway, is that during the month of June 1987, a comet orbits Earth for about a week. This somehow causes inanimate machines to come to life and act in rather bloodthirsty ways. It's kinda like that Treehouse of Horror segment that addressed what people feared Y2K was gonna be like. I assume. I don't know, that whole Y2K thing was a couple of weeks before I turned 3, so I don't really I'm getting off topic. The movie basically follows some characters that are at a North Carolina diner as they're being terrorized by big rig trucks that have come to life.
Man, what am I smoking?
That also keep circling the diner and try to kill the people stuck there. Why do the trucks want to kill these people?
I don't know.
Most of the movie is spent following them as they wait out the end of this weird phenomenon in the hopes of surviving. I guess a bad way to describe this movie would be to say that it's like if Michael Bay directed The Happening. Okay, so right out of the gate, we already know that the film's biggest connection to Maine is through Stephen King. That much is obvious. What sets this movie apart from most other Stephen King adaptations, though, is that it was set and filmed on location in North Carolina instead of Maine. Specifically in and around the town of Wilmington, to be precise. The film's producer, Dino De Laurentiis, decided to film the movie there on account of having a large studio complex in the area, along with the fact that North Carolina was a right-to-work state at the time, meaning he didn't have to hire union crews if he didn't want to, which would help cut down production costs. If that sounds like a recipe for disaster to you, that's because it kinda was. This film's production was so chaotic and off the rails that a movie about, or at least inspired by the making of this film, could honestly make for a very entertaining film in and of itself. First, there's the obvious elephant in the room. This is the only film Stephen King has ever directed. He was apparently asked by De Laurentiis to direct the film. Dino had produced some other adaptations of King's works in the past, and King agreed to direct the film, feeling as though it would be less likely to be a dud like some of his other adaptations were. For whatever reason, King wanted Bruce Springsteen for the lead role. Unfortunately for King, Dino had apparently never heard of him before that point. I honestly find that hard to believe considering how he was everywhere at that time, but nevertheless the role went to Emilio Estevez, who Dino kept referring to as Martin Sheen's kid, having worked with his dad on The Dead Zone. On the one hand, I feel like Bruce's presence would have been too distracting, but there is kind of a part of me that is curious to see what a Bruce Kingstein collaboration would be like. Filming had proven to be quite hectic. On top of King later admitting that he was high on cocaine during the making of this film, the cinematographer, Armando Nanuzzi, apparently didn't speak any English aside from the word yes, creating an obvious language barrier that must have made communication tough at times. Things also got very real during the filming of the scene with a growling lawnmower. I didn't make that up, that's in the final cut. During the filming of this stunt, a stray wood chip flew itself right into Nanuzzi's right eye, blinding him. This incident later required him to be hospitalized, shutting production down for a couple of weeks. You'd think he would have left the project entirely at that point, but nope. He actually came back to finish filming the movie after just 2 weeks, wearing an eye patch for the remainder of filming. And as if that wasn't already a big setback, production had to be shut down again when a very dangerous hurricane made its way to the set. Everyone was able to evacuate safely, but some of the crew members apparently kept daring each other to run across the street and back during the storm? Why do I get the sudden feeling these guys were the ones doing that? Anyway, I can only rate this film 2 chickadees out of 5. Unlike most Stephen King adaptations, this film wasn't even set in Maine, let alone filmed there. However, since King was heavily involved in this project by being the director and sole screenwriter, while also adapting source material he created, as well as cameoing early on in the film itself, I feel like that's enough to warrant giving this an extra chickadee when it comes to the film's main connections. As for the film itself, Well, this movie has a bit of a negative reputation. As I mentioned earlier, this is the only film Stephen King has ever directed. The film's poster takes full advantage of that fact. His experience with the film was unfortunately bad enough that he essentially went back to his day job of being a writer afterwards. He has never tried his hand at directing ever again. It's ironic because in the trailer, King says if you want someone to adapt your stories correctly, you gotta do it yourself. Yet the film was so poorly received that it got 2 Razzie nominations. Emilio Estevez being up for Worst Actor, and King sadly being up for Worst Director. They both ended up losing to Prince over some movie I've never heard of. I point this out because knowing all of that made me go into this film expecting a massive train wreck. And while I can confirm I was right to expect that, I surprisingly enjoyed the hell out of this movie. Make no mistake, this is easily one of the dumbest films I've ever seen in my entire life. King later referred to this as a moron movie, and he's not wrong. The movie virtually has no real plot, the character development is non-existent, and the movie feels a lot more absurd than it does scary. You could argue this was an unsuccessful attempt at doing for trucks and other machinery what Alfred Hitchcock did with birds 20 years earlier. Yet at the same time, it's almost like the movie knows how absurd its own premise is and just goes all out with its bad self. It knows exactly what it is and doesn't try to be something it's not. If anything, the movie kinda lets you know what to expect almost right out of the gate. The film opens on a pretty cliche opening text scroll spelling out for the audience what causes the following events to unfold. But then once it actually starts, King gets his director cameo out of the way and it's pretty funny honestly. He tries to get money out of an ATM, but the machine insults him. It's almost like the film is so bad that it's insulting its own creator for bringing it into existence.
This machine just called me an asshole.
God left me unfinished!
Then it basically cuts to what life in the 2020s feels like. A bunch of cars randomly stop on a bridge that ends up opening. I give credit that the stunts in this scene, along with the stunts in the rest of the film, are very impressive. Yet at the same time, this is all so over the top that it becomes difficult, nay, impossible to take seriously. A lot of scenes in this film are like that. Like one of the first scenes at the diner. Emilio Estevez's character is clocking in for the day, and we see that one of the names of his co-workers is Gene Poole. Believe it or not, that's actually a real name. He was one of the crew members who worked on this film. I was surprised by that because
it sounds suspiciously made up.
Early on during this whole ordeal, one of the first machines to go haywire is this electric carving knife that messes up the waitress's arm. Emilio Estevez decides to
Smash it with a hammer!
After that happens, it cuts to a baseball game where the coach gets Rochambeaued by a Pepsi machine, kickstarting an action scene so nuts that the movie feels like Saving Private Pepsi. I know I'm probably the only person on the planet that would dare compare this fucking movie to one of the greatest World War II movies of all time, but this scene really does get that hilariously intense. And as for the trucks that serve as the primary antagonists, well, one of the trucks has a clown face on its back that bizarrely reminds me of a slasher icon that came from a novel of King's that was published 2 months after this film came out, while the ringleader of these trucks has a literal Green Goblin face. I'm not even exaggerating, Marvel actually gave them permission to use his likeness. You literally could have had these trucks talk, with this guy being voiced by Willem Dafoe, and it wouldn't be any less silly than it already is.
It's time to die!
Of course, now I have to wonder, does that mean this is the first Marvel movie? I thought that came out a week later or something. Believe it or not, it gets even sillier. Arguably the bravest character in the film is literally a 12-year-old boy who, at one point, is able to communicate with the trucks using Morse code, and is able to determine that the trucks want the people at the diner to feed them gasoline? Oh, and at one point, Mater tries to go on a killing spree? Oh my god, way to make me wish that Cars had a Snyder Cut, King! Actually, oh my god, is this film secretly a prequel to Cars? Is this just meant to foreshadow humanity's downfall before Cars decide to kill all humans? Leading to the aftermath that has a drastically different tone compared to what transpired beforehand? I honestly don't get how people can get through this movie without laughing at least once. There are episodes of South Park that aren't as nuts as this movie, which is saying a lot. Despite all that chaotic hilarity, though, there is a part of me that feels obliged to mention the one or two things that do technically work. I'll give the movie this. It is an early attempt at executing the idea of technology that we've come to use on a regular basis turning against us. That is an unsettling idea, and I can tell this is trying to tap into similar fears that The Terminator tapped into previously. Only problem is that this movie is like if The Terminator was funny. No, that was them trying to be funny. This is more unintentional. It's like if the movie Duel drank 8 Red Bulls. It's also neat that the diner serves the same purpose that the grocery store in The Mist would later serve. I'm also impressed that the filmmakers were able to make it look like these vehicles were convincingly driving themselves. CGI was not used for this, so the fact that they were able to achieve this effect organically is extremely impressive. The acting in this is fine, I guess? I don't know, this isn't really an actor's movie, nor is it a character-driven film, if that makes sense. Granted, we do get some backstory on Emilio Estevez's character. Like, I guess before working at the diner, he robbed a bank at one point, and there are a couple of times where his boss, Commissioner Gordon, no, not that one, there you go, keeps threatening to turn him over to the authorities, but it doesn't really go anywhere. You could cut this out and not really miss anything. This isn't a movie you watch because you want to see someone give an Oscar-worthy performance. You turn it on because you want to watch a cinematic monster truck rally, basically. Though I will admit it was a nice surprise seeing a young Yardley Smith in something before getting the Lisa Simpson role. Unfortunately, her character turned out to be pretty annoying, as well as the polar opposite of Lisa in terms of intellect. Although speaking of The Simpsons... And speaking of seeing household names before they were famous, Giancarlo Esposito appears in the diner's video arcade early on in the film. Sadly, he's taken out rather quickly, reacting to the game room in a similar manner to how kids in the 90s reacted to that Pokemon episode that caused all those seizures. It's incredibly bizarre that his death scene in this Stephen King film is surprisingly tame compared to his death scene in Breaking Bad.
You're goddamn right.
On a side note, I want to say that this whole arcade game section could be inspired by the Polybius urban legend, but I'm not entirely sure. It could be a coincidence. Probably my favorite aspect of the film, as well as the one thing about this film that everyone seems to remember the most, is the film's soundtrack, which came from the rock gods of Australia and Scotland themselves, AC/DC. Not only are songs like Hell's Bells, You Shook Me All Night Long, and For Those About to Rock We Salute You used in very fitting ways throughout the film, but they also composed some instrumental tracks that serve as part of the film's score. At one point, Angus Young, I think, tries to play the music from Psycho's shower scene on guitar. I'd play you guys the audio excerpt to show you what I mean, but I feel like I'd be risking a potential copyright strike from the record label. It is featured in a video I found here on YouTube at this timestamp if you want to go listen for yourself. I'll leave the link in the description. You could honestly argue that this film works less as a movie and more as a really long AC/DC video that never features the band visually. They did plan on making a cameo, but their tour schedule prevented them from doing so. Would have been icing on the cake, but their involvement with this film is still pretty awesome all the same. Much like another one of King's favorite bands doing an original song for a movie about bringing a deceased pet back from the dead, AC/DC also wrote an original song for this Stephen King film as well. It even ended up being the name of the film's soundtrack album, which has an album cover that has absolutely nothing to do with this film. It's almost like the band wanted to distance this record from the film in case it flopped. Understandably so. This song was a much bigger hit than the movie that inspired it. Honestly, the way I discovered that this film even existed as a kid was through this album. Nevertheless, Who Made Who is a pretty awesome song in and of itself. This movie may have been nominated for a couple of Razzies that year, but I am very grateful that this song wasn't. Let's just say the Razzies have a surprisingly long laundry list of nominations that honestly should not have been, but for some stupid reason were. There are even a couple of Razzie wins that are like that, so it's nice that this song isn't among them. With that said, there is one scene where their music does feel out of place. It's the scene where an instrumental piece called DT is playing in the background while this kid is riding his bike around the neighborhood and is observing the aftermath of the carnage brought on by the machines. Many lives were lost, and the actor does a great job conveying the sheer horror and unpleasantness his character goes through in learning what happened to everybody. But because the instrumental song gives the listener the feeling of, yeah! The downside is, well, this is supposed to be a terrifying scene, so the music ends up taking you out of the moment. I'll also admit that while the movie doesn't overstay its welcome and is only 98 minutes long, during the last 10 minutes, the pacing did start to drag a bit for me. But I suppose it could have been a lot worse. It's not like this movie was twice that length. And overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie for what it was. Yes, it's an incredibly stupid movie. Nobody's arguing that. And in terms of being genuinely scary, the film is definitely an epic fail. Which is kind of a shame since the premise does have potential in leading to an unsettling story. I've heard that Stephen King's son, Joe Hill, wants to give this film a second remake, with some alterations to the source material being made here and there. I think the best alteration he could make is make it about self-driving cars that go haywire. Now that's something I can see being truly terrifying. The new Naked Gun film even tapped into that, albeit with a more comedic effect. But yeah, in terms of trying to make a movie that was scary, King unfortunately failed. Pretty epically. But in terms of making a film that's kinda tongue-in-cheek, has a rockin' soundtrack, and is so absurd that it has you laughing at and with it from time to time, along with just overall feeling like high-octane stupid fun that really knows how to satisfy your inner 12-year-old, I would say that King accidentally succeeded. That being said, it is definitely not for everyone. If you're looking for something that really leans into the idea of machines doing terrifying things to humanity, skip this film and watch the first two Terminator films instead. If you for some reason cannot stand AC/DC's music, then this film is easily a hard pass. And if you're looking for something that takes a premise like this more seriously, you're not gonna get that here. But if you're a diehard AC/DC fan, a diehard Stephen King fan who doesn't mind him channeling his own inner 12-year-old, or are just curious to see him try his hand at directing, or just want to see a movie that's about as close to a cinematic monster truck rally as you can get, then Maximum Overdrive just might be the film to get your inner child all revved up. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe for more vids, and even some shorts every now and then. And be sure to check out CineMaine's website, and be on the lookout for future CineMaine content.